In this tutorial we're going to create a low poly rock, UV unwrap it and bake a diffuse and normal map. So the first thing that we need to do is in object mode shift select the lamp and camera, X to delete them, so we just have the cube in the scene, tab into edit mode and then use Ctrl B to bevel. Now in object mode, if you go to the modifier panel on the right hand side, we want to add a subdivision surface, and this adds additional faces to the mesh, and put the viewport up to about 4. And with that in place, what we want to do is add a displace modifier, and this will help us make the cube look a little bit more like a rock. So in the displace modifier, you'll see that you can add a new texture, so select new and then we'll just call this rock, and then with that texture renamed you can go down to the texture properties panel, and where it has type, image or movie, what we want to do is select the Voronoi texture, and this creates a random pattern which gives us an effect that's very impressive. Still doesn't look quite like a rock, so what we need to do is tweak the settings. So on the right hand side you'll see that the distance metric by default is actual distance, but what we would like to use is distance squared, so it tends to look a bit better. And we want to increase the size, and all of these settings can be tweaked according to how you want your rock to look. I'm going to set mine around about just over 1. And the other setting that we are going to change is if you drop down colours, the contrast here can be adjusted as well, so I'm going to bring that down to around about 6. And now we have something that looks a little bit more rock-like. You'll see it's quite jagged. We want to take that away, so the first thing that we'll do now is go to Object, Shade Smooth, so that looks better. And now we have our rock. So now we need to apply the modifiers. When you apply modifiers, it's destructive, which essentially means you can't put them back again. So I'd always suggest at this point, before applying modifiers, to duplicate your object. We'll just rename it rock by selecting it and in object mode shift D. And you'll see we've got a duplicate, and we'll just turn that off now, but it means that we have a backup with the modifier should we want to go back to the modifiers at any point. So select the original model and apply your modifiers. And what you'll see now is if you tab into edit mode, we've got quite a dense geometry there. We quite a few vertices that we'd like to remove, just to sort of optimize the model further. Now an easy way to do this is in object mode to go back to your modifiers panel and add a decimate modifier, and this essentially just takes away vertices depending on the ratio here. Now I tend to sort of decimate incrementally, just to make sure that I have a bit more control. I mean, obviously you can bring it right down in one go, but I'd recommend sort of go down to about 0.5, apply, and tab into edit mode. You can see it's starting to take away vertices, but we could still take away more, and just keep repeating that process. Add the decimate modifier. In object mode you can see roughly how it's going to look. You don't want to overdo it because you want it to still look like a rock. And just keep tabbing into edit mode, and I think we can probably get away with another one. I think that'll probably do it. So now we have our rock shape. It doesn't look much like a rock yet because we haven't textured it. So what we'll do is we'll go to the material properties here. You can see there's a material by default applied. We'll call this rock. And if you go into shading, you'll see that there's the rock, and here are the nodes, the texture nodes for that particular material rock defined here. So what we want to do is we want to add image texture, and we're going to add 2 image textures because one image texture is going to be the base color, and I'm going to add a texture from a website called cc0textures.com, so all the textures on that site are free to use. I've already pre-selected some rock textures that I'd like to apply, so one of these will be for the base color, and then we'll shift D, and the second one will be for the normal map to give it the bumps that we need it to have to look like a rock. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my textures from my computer by going to open, and then I'll find the texture on my machine. So from the drop down here I can just make sure I've got the base colour, so it's colour.png, and when I drag colour into base colour I can see the texture applied. It's quite shiny, so you can play with the roughness value here just to make it look a bit more rock-like, and you will notice that the texture at this point doesn't look quite right, and we will fix this in just a second. But the first thing we'll do is apply the normal map. So again, in the drop down, find your normal map, set your colour space to non-colour, and because it's a normal map we need to add normal map, drag colour to colour, normal to normal, and you'll see that it has these bumps. It's starting to look a bit more like a rock, but we do need to fix that texture, and we'll do that by UV unwrapping. So if you go to the UV editing panel, I can see the normal map that I've just applied has come up. What you can see here is the reason behind why our rock doesn't look quite right. Basically the UV map is a bit of a mess. At the moment I can't see the materials because I'm not in the correct material preview. Now a quick way to UV unwrap is in edit mode to select everything by using A, and then go up to UV and choose Smart UV Project, and when you select that, keep the default settings, okay. What Blender does is it in a very smart way finds the seams and kind of automatically unwraps it for you, so you don't have to manually add seams and unwrap. It's very quick and it's usually fairly accurate, but I personally find that I tend to have to go in and tidy up a bit because there are the odd sort of faces hanging around that we don't really want. Ideally we just want nice islands. Sometimes if you go back into decimate, sometimes if you decimate it just a little bit more, see how far you can, see what you can get away with, that can help. But also, so it's not much better actually, but what tends to be good here is to go in and do a little bit of a manual cleanup. So the way that I tend to find works is if you go to UV and go to seams from islands, what Blender does is it creates seams on your model. You can see these red lines based on these islands, and then from there if you select the sync option up here, it means that even when you're not selecting vertices you can still see your map, which is quite handy when you're tidying up UV maps. And another setting which is very handy is the UV live unwrap, which means that any changes you make here are automatically updated here. And what you can do is just go through and clean up anything that doesn't look quite right. So you can hit C and sort of select any edges that you don't necessarily think should be seams, or you could just sort of select them individually using the edge tool. And what you can do is then use Control E to clear those seams, so you'll see that the seams go. So what I tend to do at this stage is just Control E and keep clearing up the seams, just having a quick look around and tidying up anything that doesn't look quite right. So for example, we don't want, no, we do want that, but we don't want that. This takes a bit of time, so I'll just speed this up. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it will do for now. So what we're going to do is we are going to bake our diffuse and normal map. So to do that, what we need to do is to go into shading again. So we go back into the shading tab, and what we will do is we will add another image texture. We won't connect this. This is just going to sit here like so, and we will create a new texture and we will call it rock diffuse. The default is at 1024, but I think we should double that just to get a slightly better quality, but obviously you can change this depending on your needs. Okay, and what we'll do is we go back into the UV editing, select everything by hitting A in edit mode, and you'll see that we've got the rock diffuse selected up here. Now one thing to note is that you can't bake materials in Eevee, which is the renderer that we're using at the moment. If you go up to this icon here, we want to change the render engine to cycles. Now, if you follow down that menu, you'll see there's bake, and first thing that we're going to do is bake the diffuse. So where it says bake type, go to diffuse and deselect direct and indirect. This just means that the bake texture will be nice and bright. So you want to deselect those two, keep color, and then hit bake. So now we can see that the diffuse textures are baked, and you can save that by just going to image, save as, and save out the image. What we're going to do now is bake the normal map. So if you go back into shading, you can create separate materials for this, but I think for speed and ease now, what we'll do is we'll just rename rock diffuse to rock normals, and we will go back into the UV editing, select all. You'll see that now it says rock normals. When you bake this time, it will bake over this diffuse map, so make sure you save that one out. And what we want to do is, again, where it says bake, we want to change this to normals or normal, and we will select bake. And now you have the normal map, so you can, just like the diffuse, you can go to image, save as, and save that out. So there you have it. You have a rock, a diffuse map, and a normal map to go with it. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed that and would like to hear more, please subscribe.